Before London became a city of glass and speed, there was a fortress built to command fear. For nearly 1,000 years, the Tower of London has stood as a monument to power, control, and survival. It was never just a castle, it was a warning written in stone, a place where kings ruled, prisoners vanished, and history left scars that never quite faded. Its story begins after 1066, when William the Conqueror seized England and moved quickly to secure London. He understood something essential. To control the capital, he first had to intimidate it. Power had to be visible, permanent, unmistakable. So, on the edge of the Thames, a new fortress began to rise. Around 1078, the White Tower began to take shape at the heart of what would become one of England's most feared strongholds. It was more than a military structure, it was political theater in stone. When it was completed, the White Tower did exactly what it was meant to do: dominate the skyline and the imagination. To the people below, it was a message made visible. Norman rule was here to stay. But the tower did not remain a single keep for long. Over time, kings expanded it into a far larger fortress. Stone by stone, the site became more complex, more fortified, and more symbolic of royal authority. This was not just a place built to survive attack, it was built to project control. For a time, the tower was not only a fortress, it was also a royal residence. Behind these walls, rulers planned, judged, negotiated, and governed. Its position beside the Thames made it even more powerful. The river was London's lifeline. To control the river was to monitor trade, movement, and access to the heart of the city. And over time, the tower would become something even more feared, a place where power could imprison those it no longer trusted. The Tower of London was never an ordinary prison. It was a prison for those who mattered too much. Here, nobles, advisors, claimants, and religious figures were held when the crown decided they had become dangerous. The tower held men and women whose names would shape the destiny of England. Even the future Elizabeth I once passed through these walls under suspicion, uncertain whether she would emerge alive. Before she became one of England's greatest queens, she knew what it meant to wait inside the shadow of royal power. Under Henry VIII, the tower's darker reputation deepened into something almost legendary. In Henry's England, loyalty could shift overnight, and accusations could become death sentences with terrifying speed. And then came Anne Boleyn, once Queen of England, now brought here to face her final days. Her fall remains one of the most haunting reversals in royal history, from crowned consort to condemned prisoner. She would be executed within the tower itself, turning this fortress into a stage where monarchy controlled even the final image of death. Inside the tower, punishment was never only physical, it was theatrical, controlled, and deeply political. The tower taught a brutal lesson. The crown could erase a life while preserving the appearance of order. Then came the story that would bind the tower forever to royal mystery, the fate of the princes in the tower. In 1483, Edward V and his younger brother Richard were brought here, seen by many, and then somehow lost to history. Their disappearance remains one of the most chilling mysteries in English history. No final scene was witnessed, no certainty remained, only silence, accusation, and centuries of suspicion. From that moment on, the tower became more than a prison. It became a place where royal blood itself could vanish behind stone. Yet the tower was not only a place of fear, it was also a guardian of monarchy itself. Within the same fortress that held prisoners and watched executions, the crown also preserved its most powerful symbols of legitimacy. Few places in Britain contained this much contradiction, terror and ceremony, imprisonment and splendor, silence and power. Even the crown jewels inspired audacity. In 1671, one man attempted the unthinkable. His name was Thomas Blood, and his plan to steal the regalia turned into one of the strangest episodes in the Tower's long history. And somehow, this astonishing crime did not end in simple ruin. It entered legend. But perhaps the most unexpected chapter of all was this. For centuries, the Tower also housed a royal menagerie. Lions, among other rare creatures, were kept here as living symbols of prestige, reach, and royal display. The Fortress of Fear was also, for a time, a theater of wonder. Today, the memory of the Tower is carried in part by the yeoman warders, the famous beefeaters who still guard its traditions. They are more than ceremonial figures. They are part of the Tower's continuing performance of history. And then there are the ravens, dark, watchful, and inseparable from the Tower's mythology. Legend says that if the ravens ever leave, the kingdom itself will fall. No one knows exactly when the raven legend began, but over time it became inseparable from the Tower itself. The belief is simple and unforgettable. If the ravens ever leave, the kingdom will fall. So the ravens remain, not only as birds, but as living symbols carefully protected inside the fortress. And as the light fades, the Tower enters the realm where history and legend begin to blur. Stories of hauntings have clung to these walls for centuries, as if the Tower never fully released those who suffered within it. Anne Boleyn is the name most often whispered here, a queen whose fall never stopped echoing through the Tower. The vanished princes, the condemned nobles, the forgotten prisoners, each left behind a silence that still feels inhabited. As centuries passed, England changed. The Tower changed too, but it never lost its gravity. At its center, the White Tower still stands as the clearest reminder of the Norman conquest that reshaped England. Now surrounded by one of the modern world's great cities, the Tower remains what it has always been, a fixed point of power, memory, and myth. The Tower of London is not remembered for one story alone, but for the way so many stories collided within its walls. It was a fortress of conquest, built to make Norman rule visible, permanent, and impossible to ignore. It was a palace, a seat of judgment, and a place where rulers shaped the fate of a kingdom behind guarded stone. It was also a prison, one reserved not for the ordinary, but for those whose names carried danger. Within the same walls, England preserved both its enemies and its symbols of legitimacy. It became a keeper of legends, too, where ravens, whispers, and old shadows merged with the weight of real history. And through every age, the White Tower endured, silent, severe, and impossible to forget. London transformed around it. Empires rose, monarchs changed, centuries passed, but the Tower remained. That is why the Tower still matters, not only as a monument, but as one of the clearest shadows cast by power in British history. Because some places do not simply preserve history, they become its shadow.